roll into it because everybody should be here by now. We'll probably have a couple more comment a little bit late. Thank you all very much for coming today. Thank you very much. Today, Jay is going to take us on an interesting journey. But what we'd like to do is I'd like to encourage you guys to actually pipe up and share your thoughts, you know. We love to hear what you guys think about the topic. And the topic today is talking about reality and how we shape our own reality. So this will be extremely good for the new NLP people in the house. And for those that haven't done NLP before, is it going to be any good for them, Jay?
Oh, I think it's going to be good for anybody who wants to listen and try and think about their own self and their way of seeing and perceiving things. And if it lets them question a little, then I think I will be happy to say I've achieved something.
All righty, and Jay, just before I hand it over to you completely, mate, why is this such an important topic?
Well, that's what personally to me, it's an important topic because many years ago now, more than I'd like to admit, I started to realize that the way I saw the world and what things I perceived was different to many other people. So it was one of the key things that prompted me to take the journey down the path of psychology and understanding people, relationships, and even attitudes of people. For others, I think it's important because you can't start a journey until you really know where you are. So if you question and understand yourself, where you are, what you are as a person, it actually makes a growth journey more productive. And I'm happy to have any comments on that one.
Okay, certainly good. As we go along, I can see most people are on mute, and that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you. If you have a question, do feel free just to turn yourself live, you know, turn off mute. We'll probably see it. If we don't see it, feel free to pipe up. I would love to have your questions as we go along. We have about 85 more minutes to go. Jay, you want questions the whole way?
Yeah. Yes, let's try and make it interactive, because the idea of this is to stimulate individual thought. And if a question arises, you know, I've probably got things for probably a bit under an hour. So I would love to have it go down pathways that probably make us all question, including myself.
Okay, that sounds good. It sounds like a nice target as well, having us question ourselves.
Yeah, because this is not about me forcing my opinion on everybody. This is about providing the information and having some interaction, and that's what I would love to see. So by all means, let's kick off.
May I pipe in?
Yeah.
I wanted to say that as soon as you said that about starting a journey and knowing where you are in order to be able to continue that journey in a more effective way, I automatically thought about the NLP presupposition saying that you have to respect the model of reality that the other person has.
Exactly.
There's a connection there, but sometimes I guess what you are implying with what you said earlier is that maybe we are not very well aware of our own model of reality, and also we're not aware of other people's model of reality. And then respecting those models would be step 2 or 3 down the line. We first have to become aware of those realities and how exactly we perceive them and why, right?
That is my opinion, and you have articulated it very well. Well done. Yeah. Great.
So pull out the glasses of champagne. Great session. Good night.
I'm sure we can find a little bit more. But yes, great observation, Ella. Thank you. And look, in the chat, I have posted 2 links. So just to start this off, if you want to take a little bit of time and try to access those links if you can, there's a couple of interesting little topics there on perception and how we can look at something and our mind starts to change or play games. So just take your time a little, and if you want to have a look at the first one, you will see, I believe, the first one.
Do you want me to play it now and see if I can screen share it, Jay?
Yes, please. If you can do that. I've got the photo. If you can share that. I haven't been too articulate. Thank you. Great. Well done. So in this little conundrum, if we might call it in a good Aussie language, the perception of people is to see the ballerina turning. So the fact that we can rely on is that the ballerina is spinning. What happens though, each individual can perceive the direction to be different. So my first question is, why is this so? Does anybody have any idea why that we could look at the one image that is being manipulated, going the one direction, but we can perceive as individuals the direction is different? So if you look at the image now, you will see the one on the left is turning, to me, anti-clockwise, but the image on the right side is turning clockwise. What are you people seeing?
Yeah, I see the same, Jay.
Yeah. So this one clarifies by having the three images that you can perceive, depending upon which you look at, but you can concentrate and you can actually perceive the image to be rotating in the opposite direction. If you access this link on the website yourself, this explains quite well how we can perceive a different direction of movement. So just to give you a little clue, how real is our perception?
Yeah, I was watching that and I'm like, okay, it's spinning this way. And as soon as I saw the other one, I was like, whoa.
It goes
there was
the
this
other
kind
way.
of, whoa, like my eyes kind of went, whoa.
Right.
Other people feel that? Like the whoa?
Oh, I've been blacked out. Give me 1 minute. There we go. I'm back.
I was able to see it, and then I'd close my eyes and just imagine to see it the other way. And as soon as I opened it, I could see it go the other way. And then I got to the point where I could just blink and see it go either way.
See it either way. Yes, we can do this. Some people can't, some people can. So the point is here is for us to understand, as we say, seeing is believing. Sometimes it's not, because our mind can create different images than what we're first perceiving. So moving on from that, I want to read you a little quote. I'll just get that one out the way. Mahatma Gandhi penned these words: your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values become your destiny. So why is this relevant? And I'll give you a little clue. The first few words, your beliefs become your thoughts. So what is it that shapes your beliefs? Anyone got a response? What is it that shapes our beliefs?
beliefs can come from societals,
Yes.
and it can also be your own beliefs.
So how do we formulate these beliefs? Society can have an impact. So what is it? It's what we visualize, what we experience, what we see. So our beliefs are still formed from perception. And our perception as a child is greatly influenced by what we're told by our parents, by our life experiences. For an example, some people growing up in some countries would see a weapon, a gun, as something to value, as something to be proud to have. And yet, in some societies, there's such an aversion to a weapon because it's seen as a destructive thing. That's probably the one that I most strongly can see, something that within societies, how a perception can shape the reality. Interesting one. So Mahatma Gandhi was spot on. Your beliefs become your thoughts. So your perception greatly affects what your beliefs become. So therefore, when you follow on, your beliefs become your thoughts become your words. To me, this shows how people can become anything, from wonderful, gifted, talented people to mass murderers. These words really succinctly show how that is possible. So, less of the melodramatic. I'm going to read you something to let you see that this concept of perception and reality has been around for a long time. I would think most of you would know a gentleman by the name of Plato. Anybody not heard of Plato? A little bit of information. Plato had an allegory about human perception. In Plato's allegory of the cave, Plato claimed that perception is not reality. He stated that the knowledge we acquire through our senses is not true knowledge. Real knowledge is acquired, as he said, through philosophical reasoning. Plato would therefore respond to the statement, perception is reality, by arguing that our perceptives of things are very opinionated. We view things from different perspectives, and everyone's perspective on something is different. It would be incorrect to state that perception is reality. Plato narrated an example of prisoners in a cave who chained to one wall of the cave and forced to only face the one wall. Behind them is a walkway, and on the other side of a walkway is a fire. On this walkway, puppeteers pass and are holding objects that the prisoners can only describe by the shadows cast by the fire onto the wall in front of them, along with their own images, which are distorted, obviously, by flickering flames. And so their perception is only from the shadows on the wall. The objects they perceive, the sounds they hear, and the brightness of the fire are what they know as reality. But in truth, if these prisoners were to turn around and actually have a look at the objects, they would realize that what they assumed is probably not the truth. If the prisoners were to leave the cave and be exposed to sunlight, then they would see that the fire was not the brightest light. So according to Plato, what we perceive is not reality. So that was probably one of the first, what you'd call puppetry of shadows. And I think if we remember back as children, we could put our hands into certain shape and project a shadow on the wall of a dog. And someone could say, look, there's a dog there and I can see that shadow outline. But it was a shape being manipulated by the fingers and holding it. So the reality perceived was, oh, look, that's a dog. But no, it's not. So what Plato was talking about way back in how many hundreds of years ago was exactly that same thing. But he was philosophizing about it then, about how perception is not reality. So what we're seeing today is me, an image on a computer screen. We're seeing many other people. This is our present reality. We accept it as being a visualization of a person and that this is real, this is live. We know from our experience that we're seeing a person and we accept this image as the reality of the person. Any thoughts? Stimulated any reactions so far? To go back to a little explanation about the dancers, that spinning silhouette. There's a text which explains what happens. The spinning dancer, also known as the silhouette illusion, is a kinetic, bistable, optical illusion. Try and remember that one. It's resembling a pirouetting female dancer. The illusion, created in 2003 by web designer Nobuyuki Kayahara, involves the apparent direction of motion of the figure. Some observers initially see the figure as spinning clockwise, viewed from above, and some counterclockwise. Additionally, some may see the figure suddenly spin in the opposite direction. It has been established that the silhouette is more often seen rotating clockwise than counterclockwise. According to an online survey of over 1,600 participants, approximately 2/3 of observers initially perceived the silhouette to be rotating clockwise. In addition, observers who initially perceived a clockwise rotation had more difficulty experiencing the alternative. Anyone have any thoughts as to why that might be? What about the fact that we might have a predisposition to see in our brain or to know that things mostly in the world turn clockwise? Is it possible that we have this bias, this belief system, that rotating things mostly turn clockwise? If you were observing something, yes, sorry, Adrian.
That would be very interesting to see those kind of studies, because, you know, if 2/3 see it one way and that's a higher percentage in the West than, you know, or some countries, I'd like to look deeper into those, like, yeah, sorry, it's got my head going, why?
Yeah, and it's a very interesting topic, and we'll talk a little bit more about an article recently published in Psychology Today. And there is research that's still being carried out, because with artificial intelligence, it's becoming a very topical thing to understand within the reasoning that they want machines to be able to do. I find this has rekindled my fascination a little also. I'll read on a little bit. This positron emission tomography scan of a woman has a similar effect when viewed spinning. These results can be explained by a psychological study providing evidence for a viewing from above bias that influences observers' perceptions of the silhouette. Kayahara's dancer is presented with a camera elevation slightly above the horizontal plane. Consequently, the dancer may also be seen from above or below, in addition to spinning clockwise or counterclockwise and facing toward or away from the observer. Upon inspection, one may notice that in Kayahara's original illusion, seeing the dancer spin clockwise is paired with constantly holding an elevated viewpoint and seeing the dancer from above. So again, it's our bias to how we will look at something and perceive it. So it basically, without going through and reading a lot of text, in popular psychology, the illusion has been incorrectly identified as a personality test that supposedly reveals which hemisphere of the brain is dominant in the observer. Under this wrong interpretation, it has been popularly called the right brain, left brain test, and was widely circulated to the internet in late 2008, early 2009. A 2014 paper describes the brain activation related to the switching of perception. Utilizing an MRI in a volunteer capable of switching at will the direction of observation, it was found that a part of the right parietal lobe, is responsible for the switching. More interestingly, the authors relate this brain activity to the recently described in psychology spontaneous brain fluctuations. So within a human being, there is a brain function mechanism which actually is able to be measured about why or what happens in the brain with perception. So I actually have an article which was recently published by Dr. Jim Taylor in Psychology Today, and it really explains the topic so well. And I can publish the link if somebody wants to read, but I basically have the whole article, which I'll work through in part. Anybody having any thoughts or feeling disillusioned perhaps with their own perception? Very quiet lot. Has it been that astounding? Yes, Darko, go ahead.
This perception is very, very important thing. And it is also covered a lot in Gestalt therapy, which I'm studying.
Yeah,
So
okay.
according to this, they assume and they're saying that we are not unable to experience the reality by ourselves because everyone has its own reality, depending on the perception we have.
Mm-hmm. And I'd add a bit more in that some of my research shows that the memory can have distorted reality.
Yes.
So
depends on our experience we have at this moment. For example,
yeah.
it will take some time. Let's say when I was young, I had some experience and I have made it as a memory. And that memory influenced on my behavior during the time. And now when I'm adult, I'm going back and re-examine that memory. So I find that I was wrong. And then I can re-examine and start to implement new behavior to change the memory.
So there's starting to show that in NLP, while we do a process called timeline, which is remarkably similar to Gestalt therapy, we are going back and asking clients to access memory. So it pays for us to always be aware that memory may not necessarily be a reality, but it's a reality for that person. And that's what we probably should be dealing with. I'm going to read a little. I know it's a little bit boring. Hey, yeah, good day, Yolanda.
I wanted to ask if under all of these things, sorry, was somebody else trying to talk at the same time? I can wait.
Hold on. Sorry, who was that? I thought it was Yolanda. Sorry, was that you, Ella?
Oh, yes, that's me. That's Ella. I thought somebody else wanted to talk. Okay.
That's okay.
I only wanted to say that. So, thinking of what you just read and what you just said, would this, with all of those ideas, maybe safely lead us to the question, in that case, should we just, seeing that perception are as they are, in this case, should we just try to question all of our perceptions all the time, learning that we are many times wrong in a way, and that our perception is just a very personal, subjective way of seeing the world based on who knows of what beliefs or what false memories?
Look, I would just...
So should we just question everything and just remain open? Would that be the, let's say, a solution to this problem of...
I think it's about awareness. So there's something that you said, are these recollections wrong? And I'm happy to have Adrian put his little bit in after this, but there's no such thing as a wrong perception. It is a perception. Whether it happened that way in the past for that person, I would think is irrelevant, but we should be aware that there can be distorted perceptions. We might be able to correlate information of something significant with another member of the family or somebody else, and that could give us some insight into the mental condition or the ability of the person. But generally, we are accepting the version of a client's memory as what we are dealing with. What say you, Mr. Adrian?
Yeah, well, we can get in a conversation now. We all agree that our reality is just, what we perceive. But then I think we're totally right. We're only getting a glimpse of reality, and we record a bit of it, and then later on we recall it. And we know that we're highly liable to be wrong or missing parts. Sorry, not necessarily wrong, but missing parts. But when we have the conversation with someone, did you take out the trash? Did you have a good weekend? Or who made that, or whose idea was that, or Captain Cook discovered Australia? As soon as we start talking like that, we tend to forget it. We tend to forget that we're using snippets of perception. So our clients say a problem, or we say Captain Cook discovered Australia. We can very easily have a disagreement about it, or we can very easily start working on the problem and forget what Jay is saying is right on, but we forget it all the time. We keep forgetting it. Or perhaps it's our language and upbringing that is a bit in the dark.
And I would add that the language is an important part, because remember that the middle word in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, the language is always a clue as well. Not necessarily always the meaning that they're putting to it.
Yep.
Let's carry on.
Yep. I keep a small degree in my head at all times, though. I keep a small degree of I can always be wrong. No matter how much I know, no matter what I see, it doesn't matter what I hear, even if it's someone right in front of me talking, no matter how much I see here, I can easily be wrong. And that's cool. That's okay.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say something. It
Yes,
wasn't a
Amanda.
waving hello.
Sorry.
So actually the interesting part is I have one memory. All my memories in my past, aside from one memory, I'm actually the observer from the outside. So all my perception about my memories are from the outside looking at me, but there's only one memory where I am inside. And I was like drowning in the swimming pool. So I was like drowning and I was feeling like I'm dying. And this is the only one where I perceive this memory from the inside. And the thing is, I don't know if that ever really happened or if that was a dream. And that dream became so vivid and so real to me and impacted me so much that I think it has happened, but I am not even sure. And so this is what I wanted to say when memory is like mixing up even the reality to maybe even the dreams or this kind of thing. So it's very interesting.
Actually, you've brought up something that in my past I was totally fascinated by, and Carl Jung, in his writings, obviously he in our memory of Carl Jung, he had a great belief in dreams and that they were messages. And when a child is young, a dream can have a more significant impact on the memory because the emotional stability of a child is not very strong at the time. And there are significant common dreams that were recognized as being held by human beings. And one of the ones that I remember is the dream of running, and that we were running as fast as we could, and yet we could never get away. And this had a common meaning, or was interpreted to have a meaning. And I can still remember those dreams as a child, even today. So you actually, thank you, Yolanda, you actually brought up an interesting part of what still is for us to understand about perception of a person's reality and even of our own. So I'd ask the question, when we wake up in the morning, how do we really know that we're awake and we're not still in a dream? Anyone got any ideas?
It's not exciting anymore.
Oh, very well put. Yeah. Well, I wake up and know the sun's shining, so I never see bright shining sun in my dreams. So that's one clue for me.
For me, it's not like I'm getting up from the bed many times. It's not many times, then it's not a dream.
There used to be an old saying, pinch yourself to see if you're awake. Anybody heard that one? No?
Yes, but in your memories, you can recreate pain. So in your memories, you can pinch yourself and feel the pain.
Well, that's interesting. I wasn't aware of that one. Because I can't ever remember feeling pain in a dream. I have
pretty
invincible.
All kinds of feelings when I'm dreaming. Even I can feel myself on the blanket. My whole body I can when I'm asleep, actually.
Very
There's
interesting.
much more out there in the dream world, as you think, maybe.
Okay. Well, yeah. Very good. Very good. Oh,
well,
we can go forever. Hey, Johnny.
Hey, hello. There's different ways actually for checking that. When you start practicing lucid dreaming, for example, you can look at your hands if they look different, or you can look at a clock, and some things that are impossible can kind of remind you that you are dreaming, and this way you can start getting lucid in a dream. And I liked your question just now because Zhuangzi also talks about that. You know, I had a dream last night and I was dreaming that I was a butterfly. But then how do I know I'm not a butterfly that now is dreaming that I'm a human? So the boundary between dream and reality actually is very thin. But at the time you wake up is the beautiful space where you can start playing with it and where you can go into your subconscious. So I'm very, very fascinated about that too.
It is. I actually did quite a bit of work on lucid dreaming and actually attaining that state just after you wake up, where you go back to sleep and you can actually control the dream and go to a place where you want to be and to create your own reality. And it can be very stimulating, but at the same time, very inspirational as far as meditation and the mind having, I don't know, being at peace, being calm. It's quite an interesting thing to try and experiment with. So thank you, Johnny. Thank you. I'm going to read a little bit more because I found this article in my research to be one that just gives a good viewpoint of information. You can look up Dr. Jim Taylor and look up the Psychology Today website, and you can find this article if you want to look into it. Let me please read a little. The title is Perception is Not Reality. Just because you think something is reality doesn't make it reality. Interesting start. We hear it all the time in the business world, in the political arena, in marriages. Anytime there is a disagreement or conflict, perception is reality. This aphorism is often used to justify a perception that may be objectively unjustifiable or just plain out of touch with reality. It's employed as a cudgel to beat others into accepting someone's preferred so-called reality. At a more philosophical level, this adage creates a sense of relativism. Think squishiness. In other words, everything can be moved. In circumstances that are more absolute, think the world is flat. If we go back in our history. And he's saying, let me state with an absolute sense of reality and without any perceptual flexibility at the outset that perception is not reality. As I am a word guy, meaning I believe that words powerfully shape our attitudes, beliefs, and, well, perceptions, let me start off by showing why perceptions and reality are different. Here is a dictionary definition of perception. The way of regarding, understanding, or interpreting something, a mental impression. That's the dictionary definition of perception. Here is the dictionary definition of reality. The world or the state of things as they actually exist. Existence that is absolute, self-sufficient or objective, and not subject to human decisions or conventions. Two interesting separate meanings. So what he states is clearly perception and reality have very different meanings. The former, perception, occurs entirely in the mind and in which mental gymnastics can turn any belief into reality. The other exists completely outside of the mind and can't be easily manipulated. To conflate, sorry about these big words, but to mix up perception with reality is to reject the Enlightenment and harken back to the Middle Ages. where we weren't allowed as human beings to have individual thought. Again, very thought-provoking, but also consuming. Think of it this way. Perception acts as a lens through which we view reality. Our perceptions influence how we focus on, process, remember, interpret, understand, synthesize, decide about, and act on reality. In doing so, our tendency is to assume that how we perceive reality is an accurate representation of what reality truly is, but it's not. The problem is that the lens through which we perceive is often warped in the first place by our genetic predispositions. Now, where do we just hear that? And as Ella brought up just before the start, we even have genetic predispositions as well as our environmental, our upbringing, and many biases that are there within us. So the other issues that do modify our perception, past experiences, prior knowledge, emotions, preconceived notions, self-interest, and cognitive distortions. Wow. It is very complex. We as human beings are very complex. Another guy, Daniel Kahneman, he was a noted psychologist. He received a 2002 Nobel Prize in economics. He created a veritable cottage industry by identifying what he termed cognitive biases. There are apparently hundreds. And these are systematic ways in which humans create subjective social reality that deviates from objective reality. So in every society, there are these influences that affect a person. So in NLP, dealing with clients, obviously the sorry, I've lost the word, but the place, the city, the social atmosphere, I'm trying to think of the word, the upbringing the person has in a different country with all the psyche that's generally within that country has an effect. So that we as clinicians, as a word, dealing with people, need to be aware of the effect of where the country the person comes from, their history, affects the way we might have to work with them. I think some very significant points. Again, though, it's still following on from what we said before. Anything further to add there? Anybody? Darko or Adrian?
Yes, it is important to have on mind the different.
Speak up. Yes, mate.
Okay, it is important to have on mind different
You're
backgrounds.
muted, Darko. Oh, you're not hearing? I'm sorry.
I'm not muted.
Everyone else hearing okay?
Yes. I can hear him.
Yeah, we're not hearing you, Darko.
No, I can hear him.
Yes, we can hear him.
Could someone just confirm that I'm still being heard?
Yes, I can hear you.
I hear everybody.
All good? Okay. Yeah, Darko, I'm sorry. I'll continue on if we come together later. Okay. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, thank you.
John Taylor continued on with some interesting insights. He says, I appreciate that some philosophers argue that reality doesn't actually exist, but instead is a subjective construction because we don't experience reality directly. Rather, we experience reality through senses that limit how we process reality. For example, humans only see a circumscribed spectrum of colours or hear a defined range of sounds. Sorry. Interruption. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
Rather,
I
we
like
experience
that.
electric sense of limit how we process, right? But just because we can't perceive a dog whistle doesn't mean a dog whistle doesn't exist in reality, because our perception is outside the sound hearing range of a dog. Thankfully, we have the technology in most situations that can objectively measure reality. Of course, disbelievers could argue that reading the instruments requires perception, thus proving their point that perception is reality, but we say, let's not go there. Interesting. So the question asked here is, what's wrong with perception diverging from reality? Excuse me 1 minute, please. It seems like there might be a bit of a family emergency.
Darko, what were you saying, Darko? What did you want to say before?
Yeah, I want to say regarding this cultural predispositions previously he was talking about. In my practice, I have experience of working with people from different kind of countries, from US, from Europe, also there in Australia, China. And usually I'm not focusing on this background, but I'm trying to listen what the client bringing at this moment and working with this with this structure. So the client brings his background and everything. I'm just focusing on what is present in this moment.
So for the coaches in the house, you'll pick up the differences, and in time you'll pick up more and more and more and more differences. Essentially, everyone has a mother and father. They won't always actually have them because they could be adopted. But we're all human first. We're all human first, and we want to make sure we treat all our clients individually and don't say just because a client's American or just because the clients are Australian, they're going to be a certain way. But it's great to be aware of that. And I guess you'll get more and more awareness of that as you do more and more coaching, and also more breakout rooms, because every time you do a breakout room, you're with these different people. All right, Jay, sorry, mate.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I have a visitor staying with me and could not get into the house. Okay, so now there is actually some positive attributes of this perception of reality. So going back to my notes again, there is a psychological theory that posits what are called positive illusions, which involve holding a slightly inflated view of one's capabilities. These can have psychological and practical benefits. 1, it gives hope. 2, it enhances persistence. And 3, that belief that you can achieve something above reality is what drives Olympians to break records. What drives people to achieve far greater than what was ever believed perceivable. One that comes to my mind is that nobody believed you could ever break, I think it was the 4-minute mile, until Herb Elliott did it eventually. It was believed in the past that it was impossible for a human being to be able to run that fast. So it's interesting that sometimes a view of reality can stop us performing to a level that we're humanly, truly capable of.
For those that haven't heard the 4-minute mile, the 4-minute mile was completely unbreakable. But the year it was broken, do you remember how many people it was? The year it was broken, it was like 2 weeks, and then someone else broke it. And then like 5 people broke it in the following 6 months. But no one had broken it in the thousands years prior.
Correct. So once human belief knew it was possible, it's like flying to the moon. Nobody believed we would ever escape Earth's gravity until knowledge upon knowledge creates a new reality. And that new reality allows us to achieve and believe what we can do. Interesting. All right, let's move on. We're going to get it too boring. What happens though if perception is too far from reality? So does anybody have any idea? So if we have a reality perception which is far removed from our normal social context, what happens to that person in our society, in any place these days?
Hey, Jay.
Yeah.
Every person who's reasonable would adapt to the reality. That's what we always say, right? Be realistic, don't be unreasonable. So that basically also means that any change in the world, real change, actually is created by unreasonable people because they don't sit with reality. And if you look at history, those people who basically came with new ideas, new parts of science, originally they were always considered as outcasts, as people that were crazy, that weren't accepted. So answering your question, those who are too far apart are not accepted.
Yeah, and are often considered to have mental aberrations. So in modern society, though, we still have to be aware that somebody's perception of reality too far removed can point to mental health conditions. And that is the challenge a little. And like I say, it's all about awareness. We're not supermen, we are coaches, we're using processes, and as we use those processes, we will perceive what is within our capability as a coach and what is not. And we have processes in place that if we are out of our depth, we would refer a person on to somebody who could perhaps deal with their situation better than us. So again, it's about awareness of what is acceptable reality within the context of what we are doing. Anyhow, more thought-provoking stuff. Gets a bit heavy. I might try to make it as lighthearted as possible. So, a little bit further. At a societal level, when different individuals or constituencies develop perceptions that are so far apart, one immense problem is that no common ground can be found. This disconnect is exemplified in our current political climate. Wow, what immediately comes to mind when I read those words? I think the USA situation is what comes to most people's minds. So it's quite interesting. So where there is diametrically opposite views and we don't have any consensus, the result is paralysis within Congress in USA, hostility, violence, crimes, going to extremes, and a massive divide between perception of a country. We can end up with civil war. So this topic has such a wide-ranging, it provides thought process to have an understanding for what can be a wide-ranging lot of issues within society. The challenge we face in our own thinking, as well as the thinking of others, is how to ensure that perceptions remain close to reality. This alignment is essential for us to live in the real world, find consensus with others, and maintain the individual, governmental, and society structures that are necessary for life as we know it to exist. Here are a few tips to keep in mind. And these are not my words. This is, I'm paraphrasing from this particular guy. So I just wanted to make sure that you're not perceiving this as mine. It is written in the article. Don't assume that your perceptions are reality, just your reality. Be respectful of others' perceptions. They may be right. Don't hold your perceptions too tightly. They may be wrong. And admitting it takes courage. Recognize the distortions within you that may warp your perceptions. Seeing them will better ground your perceptions of reality rather than the other way around. Now that leads back to in the start when Alice said, and I mentioned that we should know ourselves well first before we can grow well in our journey as a person of our understanding. Challenge your perceptions. Do they hold up under the microscope of reality? Seek out validation from experts and credible others. Don't just ask your friends because they likely have the same perceptions of you. And again, the NLP group, we are spread across countries, across different ethnicities, against different governmental systems. So the joy of this group of people in doing NLP the way it is that we get a wide-ranging lot of views. And just tonight, the discussion and people bringing forth their views helps us understand more what our realities are. Yeah, Johnny?
Yeah, I'd like to add something. This is beautiful what you're explaining. I'm really enjoying this. So actually, I like the idea that perceptions create reality. Because people, when they act upon their perceptions, they create the reality as they go. Not only philosophically, but even scientifically. It's a different conversation, but actually we do create reality in the field.
Yeah.
But also perceptions, they often are considered as something like, this is your opinion, my opinion, your perception, kind of like something which divides people. But actually, I like to see perceptions as spices. Like, hey, what kind of perception do you have? Oh, I haven't tasted that one yet before. Look, I'm actually eating spaghetti now, and my spaghetti tastes different depending on which kind of spice I put on there. I mean, it could be a little bit more Chinese style, more Italian style. So from the moment you start embracing perceptions as different ways of looking at things, that's when you, in an NLP perspective, can add value, right, to your customers, but in life in general, even in your relationship with your spouse, in anything. I stop.
I have to agree totally. And I'll add one bit more. The joy of when we go to live in another country, as many of us are experiencing in China, that greatly widens our perspective of what people are. And the joy of travel to many different countries is that we become a more aware and open person to all different perceptions of different peoples. And when we can communicate and understand that, we can find a common ground position. And if we can do that, we don't have conflict. Quite interesting. Thank you, Johnny. Yeah. Could you say a bit of spaghetti for me?
Yeah, it's good. You know, actually, different perceptions allow for creativity. It's by crossover, putting things in a different perspective, that you can actually identify new things. So simply by looking at China, Europe, or China, US, whatever, if you use one way, if you use their way, I mean, party A, to look at a situation from their way, party B, you actually suddenly have a situation where you can add something that A or B didn't see. So this is really actually a source of creativity.
Well put. And I have to agree, because in my own experience, it is the joy of meeting other people's discussions with the societal values, about the societal values, the way children are brought up, that makes for our understanding of peoples. And I was quoted something a little while back, which I've held in my memory for a long time. And it was by quite a wise older man back in my university days as a middle-aged adult. And it said in education that if you want to change the child, you must start with the grandparents. That has quite a depth of perceptive thought needed to understand, is that it takes generations to be able to change the viewpoint of a society, and can take generations to change the attitudes and the achievements of a society. So it's a far-reaching concept. And what we've just been saying about perceptions and understanding to allow common ground and to acceptance of each other is it's not part of NLP, but it's part of us understanding the peoples that we'll deal with as NLP practitioners. Hey, let's move on a bit. I was going to explain something about why this topic found itself to be important within myself and my psyche. In my earlier life, I worked as an investigator where there was a fire scene, where there was an electrical incident that might have caused a fire or explosion. And part of those duties is to interview witnesses. And I found over a number of jobs that I did is that, you know, the police would have people there who witnessed something. So I would go along and get the viewpoint of them maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours later, that they are still there. The police have already interviewed them and taken notes. I come along and ask questions based on a technical knowledge as to prompt them differently. And what surprised me was the information that I would have would be different in some significant ways to that which was ascertained by others. And not only was that so, but in a time frame of a person who has witnessed something, the excitement of it immediately afterwards, their vision, their concept of what they saw changes over time. So that the adage as an investigator was, the better information is always closer to the occurrence of the knowledge that they have of the time when the incident occurred. But I also found that after time, you got a more coherent and easily trackable incident analysis, because their thinking, the adrenaline's worn off, and there was relevant information. So again, one person viewing an incident can give different views, different perceptions of what they saw over time. 2 or 3 people looking at the same incident see different things. Sometimes the differences are only small, sometimes they can be significant. So this is what stimulated me as part of my hobby of psychology and things at the time, that this was a very interesting topic of how humans perceive things differently. And one of the reasons that it sticks with me today is that we hear of people who are convicted of crimes by that of a witness. The vision or the version of events given by a witness who will stand up there and swear that that's what they saw, or that they saw a person. And when we see television shows where a lawyer, a solicitor, whatever, which country at, can question that and call into doubt the perception of what they saw. And my thinking is that if an NLP practitioner was advising that person doing the courtroom how distorted we could make and how we could challenge almost any witness and perhaps distort what they thought they saw or discredit what that person could really say. Just an interesting thought on my part. Open to anyone else.
Jay, are you saying if anyone needs to go to court here, don't get a lawyer, get an NLP guy?
I'm saying you get an NLP guy to help him. just an interesting perspective. Yeah.
With that in mind, are there pre-formulated questions that an NLP practitioner, or let's say a lawyer in court, could ask someone to challenge their perception of reality? Is there something like a set group of sentences, phrases we can use to encourage that openness to view things in a different way, or just question your own perception of reality?
Well, I think in the words of dear Mr. Chris Williamson, there are processes that we follow. And I'm sure some of those processes could be used when applied in any circumstance. And it'd be very interesting to get Chris's view on that one. I don't believe there is any set process that could be used, because every individual circumstance has factors which need to be considered. That's my opinion. What think you,
for
Mr.
sure,
Adrian?
I'll concur with that. However, the more we practice with this, the easier it would be. So there's a gentleman called John Naylor. Some of you met John in Bali last time. John got pulled over by the police, and I've actually been in trouble with the police with John as well, taking video footage in places we shouldn't be, like on an edge of a cliff in Brisbane. But John got pulled over by the police, and the police are confrontational, but he did a simple technique of just standing on the side, and he stood next to the police, and by standing next to the police, he proceeded to point to the car and talk about how the car was going too fast. So then he's on the same side as the police talking about the car and how the car was going too fast. He was the driver of the car, but he got out and positioned himself next to the police, pointing back to the car. So yeah, there's some stuff you'll learn. And I'm sure if anyone here ever ended up in court, Chris, I, or Jay will be happy to chat and talk you through some stuff to help you stay composed. Anchoring would probably be a more useful thing to have as well.
Yeah, yes.
That
was meant to be a little tongue-in-cheek, but there's a reality that the techniques of NLP, we can use them in many of our life situations. And our personal integrity should guide us as to how we use it. And as we learn more of the NLP, we learn that our reality, what we're seeing, and what our vision of what's possible changes. So, yeah, Johnny, yeah.
Let's remember where NLP came from, right? Gestalt therapy, and a number of people studying behaviors of certain people very good at what they did. and then turning that into processes. So actually, good lawyers are doing this already. This is exactly why they are good lawyers. And I would like to answer the question of the lady just now. If you would like to know a set of questions, I would say go to the best lawyer and look at some of his recordings where you can find them and see what kind of questions that lawyer asked to make a witness to start self-doubt, or to basically put a witness in a self-conflicting situation so that they will have to reframe. So actually, the best examples are the ones where you can actually derive the processes from, if you're a good NLPer.
Yeah. And what I'd add to that is, if you watch a legal television show, a movie, you will find that a big part of the lawyer's work is delving into the background of a witness. They will want to know every detail about that witness. So they will have key points in their history to be able to make triggers, or to find out what the anchors might be. And while a lawyer may not say they're using NLP as such, like NLP is an amalgamation of these processes. So I believe Johnny's right. They are using this a lot. But when studying NLP, I would think that we have a greater combination. And when you do a mastery level, then you would have keys which can substantially change events in some way. So I'm actually finished the material for tonight, and I think it's about time for a bit more open discussion. If anyone has any interesting experiences that they can now relate of their own reality, whether dreams, whether changing an event or understanding, I think it would be good to share what we might have had come to mind through the process of listening tonight. Over to you, everybody. Yay, Darko.
I want to share, obviously, when I was younger, in my earlier stage of life, I saw myself as victim. So ever since my behavior was as victim, not appropriate for myself now. And then I have done some NLP things, coaching things, and I have changed my perception about myself. Mm-hmm. So I want to say that it is possible to change personal perception.
Yeah.
And then to act, to give and to input different way of acting and behavior. That is what happened to me.
Definitely. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah,
thank you, Darko. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. Anybody else got anything to share? Hey, Tapan.
I have been experimenting, a lot on these lines, and I believe that you can actually hack your own system by believing what you want to believe happened, and thereby changing the future. A little bit like Adrian will probably talk about micro editing. Adrian, we learned about micro editing in Bali.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you edit out parts that you don't want, which maybe really happened, but you just delete it and you paste the movie together, and that's your new memory, and that's your new belief, and that's your new life.
Mm-hmm. Well, we can push back to irrelevance certain memories which are limiting us. So by losing something which is creating a limitation, we then allow ourselves to excel. I have an interesting example. There's a guy who's a super coach in USA, and he works with the top basketball players in the USA. And the incident or the thing I read about was the final, the two teams had got to the final playoff match, and I can't remember who the player was, but he had injured himself. So there's actually, I think, 2 weeks or 10 days from one match to the grand final match. By going to this guy who was an NLP coach who had his own basketball court, he helped this person maneuver on the court and not use that injured muscle that was in his body. And by doing that, by programming, if the word is his mind, not to do any maneuver that would use that muscle, he was able to perform to a very high level on the court. They won the championship, and he got recognized for his importance in that match, whether he was the player of the match or the series. So an interesting concept of how you can actually tell your body that part no longer works. Same as with the memory. So you can physically make your body work by programming your mind to perform physical actions. How it's done, I have some inkling. It's by physically actually doing and moving as part of it while using NLP processes. So what you say is highly possible. Hey, any more?
Okay, I might just tap on what Tapan just said there, and what you said as well, Jay. I've been doing this for so many years, but if I get the opportunity to go through timeline or Gestalt, I'll still be like, yeah, take me.
Yeah.
Because I've still got stuff in my past that I can update. And I've been through so much, yet there's still plenty of stuff I like to update. Yeah, there's some more things I'll update. I said to Darko the other day, Darko, are you free? There's some stuff I want to update.
Yes, something pop up on my mind while talking. So I want to say, at least I am doing what I am doing every day. I'm constantly working on updating and changing my perception. And I also think, like insight I get from this meeting, that when I'm working with client, I'm trying to change the perception. Maybe in the past, maybe now. So that is something very interesting, which I was not be aware before, that we are constantly working on changing perceptions. That drives our life.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one thing I would add there is, it's interesting to me how as soon as we realize a limitation of our perception and we deal with that, how so much more suddenly opens up available to us. And as Adrian was just saying, that, you know, using a bit of Gestalt, I come back. As we deal with a memory, a limitation or something, it's interesting how it then opens up for us to be able to work further on other issues. So it is an ongoing process. And that's what I'm finding fascinating about NLP. Yay. Hey, Johnny.
Something that I also realized, what you just were saying, you can indeed change your belief on something, and this indeed can have like physical effects. For example, I always used to just do all my fillings, my teeth without anesthetics, because I just kind of told myself, this is just a signal, right? This is not painful. And it was not a problem, even to the extent that they almost once hidden a nerve almost. The dentist say, don't do that, it's too risky. But actually it was not a problem. When it comes down to other people, what I noticed is that the more you connect with another person, the more you're able to actually help another person do this. And as a coach, this is quite interesting because you need to connect, right? Even ICF, there is a first step, like you need to connect with your coachee, but actually you can use energy to connect, you know? This is why, for example, gurus can have such an impact when they heal other people. But this is partially because of the charisma they have. This is one form of energy, but there's also like the real internal energy, like whether this is Qigong or the prana or life energy. You can also implement that in your engagement with another person. And you can actually help that to install a belief or reprogram a belief with the other person. So the way you connect with a person energetically is very determining for the effect that it has.
Well, the first thing that I talk about, the first thing that is talked about and part of the learning is establishing rapport. So rapport is about equal communications. And then we talk about calibrating. So calibrating is about working to that same level. And that, I believe, is when we are working with our energy to meld with the other person as a client. So interesting perception. Yeah. I think we've started to, as our life experience, that we can feel the energy of another person and work with those people and feel something in common. So a little technique of learning to project energy is I think, a further pursuit.
Yeah, you can actually train that. There's also a process for that. And by the way, with regard to the lawyer that uses NLP, the best way to get into a courtroom is to basically undress the other lawyer, like, hey, you're using NLP. Then that lawyer actually gets into trouble.
Could be. This is all just about discussion and awareness, and it just shows the width and application of what NLP has become in this day and age. Yeah, which is, I find, quite fascinating.
It hasn't been covered here, Jay, but for those in relationships, I've mentioned it a couple of times. Often in relationships, we think it's the partner that's creating, or the partner that's the reason our life is, or if only they were more open, if only they were more open or something. So be aware, a lot of the times we project or we see the problems in our partners or our children or in our business partners or sometimes even the customers. Mm-hmm. And that could be a sign of us forgetting about the reality.
Yeah. And what we're perceiving of, what we're perceiving of another person is filtered. And that's one of the things that didn't really get into so much, but they are filters because of prior experiences with that person, events. We have an expectation that that behavior is based upon the same criteria when it could be totally different. And if we change our position and listen differently, and we've learned within NLP, active listening, the concepts of listening with intent, that it makes a difference in any conversation. So thank you, Adrian. Yeah. Now, somebody else was saying something, so I missed who it was.
That's me again, Ella.
Yes, Ella.
You've reached the topic that I wanted to get closer to, meaning relationships and perceptions that we have about others and that others have about us. Mm-hmm. Maybe this also may touch upon what Johnny was saying about energies and how we may, if we can, influence others with our energy. My question is, if we have a negative perception of someone, or if they have a negative perception of us, and that negative perception affects significantly both people's lives and maybe other people's lives too, especially if there are children involved, should we attempt to influence their perception? And if so, how?
Yeah, Johnny, go. Yeah.
So there's something very important you need to know when it comes down to energy work, and you see this in different ancient cultures. Whenever you use energy, you always need to ask permission of what they call the universe. And this may sound very weird, but what you're actually doing is you're tapping into your subconscious to feel whether something you're going to do is appropriate or not, because you can't use this for wrong purposes. It's going to hit back to you because you're creating situations that are going to backfire. And this is what they call karma. There's different ways of explaining this philosophically, but also in how these ancient cultures look at this and in other ways. But to answer your question, the way you can proceed is two things. One is you change your own perception. That's the first thing, because your own perception is something within your control. And your perception determines your actions, and your actions will basically influence the perception of the other and also change their behavior. You would be amazed to see how much another person changes when you change, even if it's in a negative way. Because they don't expect you to change. They have like some kind of a relationship, and often these relationships are toxic, but they are embedded in the past. And by you doing something opposite to what you have been doing in the past, right? And this might be a bit counterintuitive for you as a person because it is not you, but actually intuitively you can know that doing something different might actually trigger a chain of reactions of differences. And you will see that the other person suddenly can change in amazing ways. You can go into specific situations if you like, but I'm trying to explain it in a general way. That's the one. The second thing is, if there is permission for you to work with the other person, then you can have a conversation, but you can't force or control this. The only thing you can do is you can start a dance, if you like, because all relationship is mutual. Even the desire of a non-relationship is still an energy between two people. And whatever you do with another person is dancing. So what you can do is engage the other person in the dance by kind of helping them to change the perception of how the dance is going. Because when you're learning to dance, you step on each other's toes, right? And whose mistake is that? That's one question. But the question could also be, whose feet have been hurt? And what could be a different type of music we could dance on? It's kind of like the context. So there's many different ways of actually approaching this when you want to change the perception of the other person, which then will lead to change of the behavior of the other person. I hope this helps.
Yes, Alicia, carry on.
Maybe to try to sum up one of the points that Johnny brought up is, in a simple way, if you can't change your own perception, how could you expect anybody else to? I mean, as a coach, if we can't do something for ourselves, there's no way that we have even the experiential knowledge to be able to help somebody else to do that. And that's difficult because usually the spot that we can't see, the biggest blind spots we have are the spots where we are, which is why this is why coaches exist, right? Because we can see things that people can't see because they're too close to it. So in a situation like that, that's important. I've also learned that you have to change people choose the path of least resistance, but like the NLP presupposition, they choose the path that works the best for them. So if there's something that they're getting out of their pattern of behavior, no matter what you do, it's not going to change them, especially if you're trying to change somebody. Usually the reason you're trying to change them is not for them, it's for yourself. So you have to be very careful about that as well, I think.
Thank you, Lisa. There is a concept that I have worked with men's groups, and we have the saying, that which you don't like about somebody else is the reflection of yourself. So we have the saying, here's the mirror. So when you're observing something that you don't like for somebody, so often it is a trait of yourself that you're projecting that you're not aware of. So the saying is always for us, here's the mirror. So if someone's making a statement, you always do this, and I find it really annoying. You go, well, okay, you should be challenging. Why do I find that behavior annoying? And that's where your perception of yourself comes in, is to look at, well, that behaviors that I don't like of others, what is it about myself that I need to look at? So good
Thank
question.
you all.
Yeah.
Thank you, all three of you, Johnny and Alicia and Jay. Thanks for your answers. They have helped and they've confirmed things I've read or heard or even thought myself before. They are good reminders of things, because it's hard to keep track of all of these things at the same time and not go on a wrong path of thought, so to say, sometimes.
Yeah.
At the same time, while I agree with everything that each of you said, I'm at a loss of I'm at a loss as to how to, I think I'm lacking those tools and techniques is what I'm trying to say. But
Okay.
yes,
Well, yeah.
I know what frame of mind to keep in this area, at least, and what to work on or what to keep in mind.
Well, the solution I would suggest is that you can find a party, a person who can be, and that's what counseling is about, the mediator who can look at and work with each individual and help within the process of the understanding of each person individually, so that then you can find the common ground.
One thing I would just
Alicia?
like to, I'd just like to interject one thing, because the mirroring thing, I actually talked about this earlier on a different call. It is a thing that people around us mirror us, but I just want you to know, Ella, that sometimes it's not that they're mirroring, it's our perception of it is not necessarily mirroring exactly who we are. Okay, so just because you might be with a narcissist doesn't mean you're a narcissist, but it could mean that you have boundary issues or an insecurity, that it's not necessarily mirroring the exact behaviors that that person's exhibiting, but it mirrors something else energetically or psychologically within you that you usually have no idea or weren't aware of. So.
Yeah, look, well said, and thank you, because we are generalizing so much, and the position we come from ourselves, this is all about looking at ourselves. The whole topic about awareness and perception and what is reality is about self-awareness, and it depends on the position we are coming from. And that's what, right from the start, I said, we have to understand ourselves. And the idea of a coach is to help us move along that path. So I lost my track, sorry. So it's about that first level of understanding, and then you can start to recognize what is that positions in your relationship with any other person in the way you communicate. And it's very hard. We can't be specific. Everybody's going to have issues, but the point is, work with the coach first. Don't try to do it all yourself. That's my suggestion.
And even if you're a coach, you should be working with a coach. Actually, especially if you're a coach, you should be working with a coach. Now, Jay, we're a bit over time because of that great conversation.
Yeah.
Did I just put your WeChat incorrectly?
I didn't look. Hug Weasel. No, that's correct. Yes, that's correct. My WeChat name.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. Do feel free to stay here and chat a bit longer if you'd like to.
Yeah. I'm going to hang around for a few more minutes.
Jay and a couple of people may stay here for a few more minutes, but we're a few minutes over time because of the conversation, and there was no way I was going to interrupt. Ella, thank you very much for sharing. Everyone that's raised issues, thank you extra for sharing and going in and sharing something. Sometimes it's easier to give advice than to ask. So really, Ella, nice work sharing that, and beautiful shares from the coaches in the house.
Yeah.
Thank you as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Really
you,
well.
Jay, for a great workshop.
And thank you everybody for contributing and making it interactive. I've really enjoyed it. You know, it's reinforced a lot of my beliefs and give me a couple of things that I'm going to look at a little further. So thank you.